Hello friends, sworn blood enemies, losers, icons, whoever happens to be watching at this given moment. So today we're going to be talking about a case that is absolutely just... You know when you hear about cases that are so demoralizing, heart-wrenching, disgusting that you almost kind of want to try and find a reason to make it all make sense, to not exonerate the perpetrator, but to make sense of what they did. This is one of those cases, and obviously you'll see there's a very surface level reason of like, oh yeah, they obviously did this because XYZ, but that doesn't explain enough. I'm being cryptic, let's just get into the case at hand. Teen who murdered baby in bedroom shortly after secret birth at age 16 gets at least 35 years in prison. The attorney for Chloe Coplen-Anderson said she'd been abused and suffered from multiple mental health conditions as a result. We're going to get into some details about all of this, but as a general notion, I think on this channel we've discussed this time and time again, is that mental health can explain why things happen, but it does not excuse you from whatever you do because of mental health problems, right? So the consequences are still consequences, but we just have more context. A Nebraska teenager was sentenced to 35 to 60 years in prison on Thursday, April 24th, after pleading no contest to second-degree murder in connection with her newborn's 2023 death. Chloe Coplen-Anderson, 18, appeared in Sheridan County District Court on Thursday, where Judge Travis O'Gorman handed down the sentence. Chloe Coplen-Anderson hid her pregnancy and slit her newborn son's throat shortly after giving birth in her bedroom, according to an arrest affidavit obtained by People. An officer with the Gordon Police Department arrived at Coplen-Anderson's home on November 6, 2023, after receiving a report of a teenage girl giving birth to a baby boy who was not breathing, the affidavit states. So let's start from what I deem the most obvious. There is no quote-unquote good way to murder a baby. Let's just make that very clear. That being said, there are different levels of violence in murders. You know, I think we've all seen examples of where murders were mildly violent as opposed to when it's a bloodbath. To slit a newborn baby's throat, I don't know if I've actually heard of a case where that's occurred before. I've obviously heard of mothers killing their children, but slitting the throat is definitely one of the most violent things I can imagine, specifically with a defenseless baby. The affidavit says that the officer arrived to find Coplen-Anderson's father saying he believed the child had been stillborn and that it was too late to save the baby. Okay, how does that explain a stillborn with a slit throat? Okay. I mean, I guess if you are the parent of a kid who does that, you want to find every reason to exonerate your kid or why, like, it's impossible that your kid did something terrible. But, I mean, realistically, I don't know how kids don't come out with a slit throat. Coplen-Anderson's mother, however, immediately identified her daughter as the baby's killer. At the time, the mother was weeping. She told police her daughter had hurt him and noted marks where the baby had been stabbed, according to the affidavit. Both parents told officers they'd seen their daughter remove a knife from the kitchen earlier that day. The affidavit notes that the knife was still missing from the drawer when authorities arrived at home. According to the affidavit, police were later called back to the residence after Coplen-Anderson's father found the knife hidden in his daughter's closet and covered in blood. Coplen-Anderson's attorney, Todd Lancaster, tells People that Coplen-Anderson had been abused by family members. So this is a big part of the story that we don't have any information on. So here's where I really start cycling through the possibilities of what occurred here, right? Because in Nebraska, you can abort the fetus until 12 weeks. So we can ask ourselves why she didn't do that, or we can also maybe surmise that she didn't necessarily know. 3 months of a skipped period. I don't know how you don't notice that, but maybe she thought nothing of it if she did notice. Aside from that, so if she actually actively decided to keep the child, there's a question of, okay, so did she decide to keep it because she thought she was going to be able to follow through in some way? What was the plan here? Because the other thing that I kept thinking while I was reading about this is that all states have the safe haven law, which is basically the law that says that you can go to a fire station or even certain hospitals, or there are like emergency centers. I can't remember what their official name is, but you can basically drop off the kid anonymously. So if you didn't want the child, that's quote unquote fine. This is why I'm actually in favor of abortion for very specific cases. I don't think you should be willy-nilly about it. Like, I don't think abortion should be used as contraception, let me be clear. but there are people who are not prepared to be parents, and there are people who shouldn't be parents, end of. And I don't think people who don't want to be parents should be forced to be parents, because that's how you get fucked up children after, because guess what? Their parents don't love them. But anyway, if she decided to not abort and she decided to keep the child, I'm really wondering what the plan was. Did she think she was going to come out to her parents when the child was born and be like, hey, by the way, had a secret for 9 months. It's here now. This is my baby. Or if she was planning on putting the child up for adoption but got cold feet. Listen, I have no idea, but I really was thinking about this because I don't want to justify these actions because there's nothing justifiable here, but I was trying to think, what was the projected outcome? Like, what did we think was going to happen and what were we going to do about that? And granted, she was 16 when all of this occurred, but at the same time, 16 is old enough to still know that this is morally reprehensible, just completely avoidable. I think that's the biggest crime here, is that all of this situation was completely avoidable. And I think that's what makes a tragedy even worse, is when there's so many ways out and someone just chooses to not take any of them. Also, the concept that she was abused, I'm not going to undermine that. I'm just going to say that does not change anything in the context of what happened here. Like, it can explain things, but it doesn't change anything, in my opinion anyway. The 2 witnesses called by the defense testified that as a result of the trauma, Coplen-Anderson suffers from multiple mental health conditions, including post-traumatic stress disorder and major depressive disorder. Lancaster also said Coplen-Anderson was 15 when she became pregnant with the child and that the baby's father was 19. Sex between a person who is 19 and an individual who is 15 or younger is considered sexual assault in the state of Nebraska. So that was another part of this that I was wondering, like, where was the father in all of this? Was he aware? How old was the father? And my opinion on age gaps is complicated because, like, do I think it's weird for a 15-year-old to date, for example, an 18-year-old? When you're in high school, that's weird, mainly because a lot of seniors don't hang out with the 15-year-olds, which are what, freshmen, sophomores? I don't know. But there's such a big divide between the grades, right? At the same time, it's also like, because you're still both in high school, there is something that binds you together, as opposed to, like in this case, a 15 and a 19-year-old who I'm assuming was done with high school, which makes it that they're already an outsider from her community. So I think that makes it weirder. And this is me putting the laws aside, because the laws change from state to state. I'm just saying. So I don't know what their relationship was. I don't know if it was sexual assault or if she quote unquote consented, in the sense of, aside from the law, she was consenting for the thing to happen. So she wasn't raped or abused or anyway. I don't know about that. So there are a lot of question marks here. And if it was actually an assault, I'm wondering why it never went reported. And if it was an assault, I'm wondering why it didn't go reported, or why she didn't at least try and go to the hospital, especially, for HIV scares, things like that. I'm not minimizing how scary it must be to do that. I'm just wondering, again, what happened and how and why. Lancaster also claimed in court that no adults stepped in to help his client or stage an intervention. In August of 2024, Coplen-Anderson agreed to plead no contest to the second-degree murder charge in exchange for prosecutors downgrading the initial charge of first-degree murder. Prosecutors also dropped charges of child abuse resulting in death and use of a deadly weapon against Coplen-Anderson. Second-degree murder is punishable by anywhere from 20 years in prison to life in prison in the state of Nebraska. As it now stands, Coplen-Anderson will be at least 51 when she leaves prison, as the judge agreed to give her credit for the more than 500 days she has already been behind bars. So I was wondering about this sentence because I was seeing a lot of people online saying that the sentence was too harsh, and I just can't really agree to that. And it also goes back to how violent the killing was. Like, obviously I'm not going to say, oh, if the killing had been nicer, then it's fine. No. But the slit throat is really an image you can't get out of your head. Like a baby with a slit throat. I think that alone adds so much more of a visceral quality to all of it. Aside from the fact that really, when it comes to children, all crimes are automatically magnified by a billion because for the most part, children are defenseless. So I think that's part of it. I think it goes back to also what I said about the safe haven laws, about looking for any other option, any other documented option, mind you. If there had been documentation that she tried to put the baby up for adoption, if there had been documentation of anything wherein it suggests that she actually didn't want to kill the baby but was looking for solutions, I think that would have made a big difference. Whether she did that and maybe there's no trace or maybe they haven't looked into it, I don't know. But because there is no trace that we know of her seeking a solution, it really does make it seem like the premeditated idea was, hey, I'm going to hide this pregnancy, I'm going to carry it to term, and then I'm going to murder the child and then have that be that. I don't know how you'd think that you'd get away with that. Then again, a 16-year-old, 15-year-old's brain is a different story, so I'll just leave that there. I found out about this on social media, right? And the thing about social media with this case that's really bothering me is that people are turning this into a political issue. They're politicizing it. So someone tweeted about this, and this is how I found out. It has 208,000 likes, and it says, access to abortion care could have prevented this. While I do think there should be access to abortion care for the reasons I listed before, because people who don't want to be parents, I think, are dangerous to children. People who were raped, people who are in some type of situation that is beyond just, I'm going to have unprotected sex because I don't give a fuck, and then I'm going to basically turn to really drastic consequences and quote-unquote solutions. Her not having access to abortion care, I don't really know what we're trying to say there, because abortion is legal in the state and we don't know if she even looked into it. So to immediately rush to the conclusion of, oh, if she could have aborted, this all would have been avoided. Well, she could have aborted and this could have been avoided, but nothing was done. And again, we go back to what I said before. There is no record of her looking for alternative solutions. That being said, I also do not appreciate the politicizing of certain true crime cases. Obviously, some cases are automatically political and there's nothing you can do to get away from that. That being said, here I think it's a bit of a projection, because this comment would be valid if we knew she actually was planning to abort. That being said, if this is a mentally unstable person, based on how the article describes her, or a person that has mental health issues along with the PTSD and the abuse that she went through, we don't know that this person ever even looked into abortion. So to immediately put it as, oh yeah, well, if she could have gotten an abortion, this all would have been fine. It's like, well, we don't know that that was the plan at all. Maybe the plan was to keep the child, and last minute she freaked out. Or maybe the plan was always to kill the child and she ended up doing it. We have no idea about the intention. So to assume that this kid had good intentions, or had the good intentions, quote unquote, anything that avoids murdering the baby, I don't buy that. And I think that it's also a little bit infantilizing. And granted, she wasn't a full-grown adult, but she was close enough at the time. And I think it's a little bit infantilizing to act like this kid was completely unaware of her options. She might have not known all of her options, but then again, that's also why we go back to point A, which is the safe haven law of dropping off your kid, or even prior to giving birth, going to Planned Parenthood, going to a hospital, going to urgent care, any place that can give you some level of information about what your options are. As far as we know, none of that was done. Of course, there are limitations because, again, she was only 16, so it's not like an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old that are independent, probably have their own place, blah, blah, blah. So definitely that would have been an issue. But again, we return to, it depends on what her intention was. Because if you full on know the moment that you find out that you're pregnant, that you're going to carry it to term and then you're going to kill the kid, you're not going to look at any sources that can help you, right? I don't know what this person's intention was. I don't necessarily think the sentence is too extreme, for the main reason that there were so many ways out, and there's no proof that she looked for a way out. And also, it seems like, based on what the article was implying, that there's a level of mental instability. I don't know if I'd say 50 years or life in prison or whatever. I do think a 20-year sentence makes sense, honestly, because this is murder, and for the most part, I think murderers should get some of the highest sentences along with pedophiles. So you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. With the information we have right now, honestly, it's quite difficult to be neutral, because what we have pretty much sways against her, in my opinion. You guys can let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.